Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Gelvin Valley. We are back on Wild Wild Wes's masterpiece here in Farming Simulator 15. Getting to be a very old game at this point, but we are still enjoying a beautiful map. I'll repeat again, for me it's always been about the map, and if there is a map that you can call home, well, I gotta keep coming back to it. I don't know about anyone else. Alright, let me get my average speed down here so I can... Oops, too far. Load this puppy up once more as we continue hauling straw here to clean our farm up before the fall tillage and replant. I'm going to have to really think about replanting here, as the price, I knew there was another bale back here, is really kind of in the toilet. I think I got all the bales back there, just the front little bit to do. And we'll be off down the road to pick up the rest. Just two more. There we go. Slither on. Oh! Grabbed by something. There are in Farming Sim, there are very, very strong gates, fences, and whatever, where they can reach out and grab you and hold you fast, which is kind of nice, because in real life, anytime you so much as nicked something, would tear things apart with the power of a tractor or whatever. So you're just glad those kinds of things don't happen in here. In the previous episode, I was talking about my early working career. 4th, 5th grade is about when I got started working for another uncle, and he had strawberries at the time. That was his primary crop, and he had it on several patches in various locations. We talked about how picking the things, and strangely enough, I didn't grow to hate strawberries. One would think maybe if you were forced to pick them, which I basically was. My parents sent me out there to do something, and my mother was out there. One would think if you're forced into it, that you would have no use for them. But to this day, strawberries hold a special place in my heart. They're still my all-time favorite berry, and especially the ones that are grown here in good old Oregon. And we don't have that many anymore, but they are the sweetest, best berries, when you can get them here locally. And that's my memories from being in the field, getting them back in the day. Now, when you go to the store, most of the time, the berry that you get comes from California, and probably what happens is a lot of them are picked a little green, and so they ripen a little on the truck on the way up, and they're just not the same. Some of it's the variety too. They got to make the berry hardy enough so it can survive the journey, and I get that. That's important. But I think the local berries are softer, and they just taste better. I don't know. I can't put it into words. But it's much more economically viable, apparently, to raise them in California versus up here. And I'm not sure why that is. I'm sure climate plays a role. You know, here in Oregon, a lot of times it's hard for the sky to turn off the water tap, you know, to announce that becoming a summer. So many times their farmers are fighting rain, you know, in early spring. And, oh, we got this whirligig again. When I hit the F, that's what makes him interesting. I wonder what that does to my FPS. Look at that, 60 FPS. Wow. Okay, there it flickered just a little. Just to keep it from messing me up, I think I'll just take it off. Not bad though. So, most of our strawberries anymore, it seems like they come from California, and they're still good, but I would say maybe what I should say is my favorite berry is the Oregon strawberry. You know, once it comes to berries coming from California, they're just not as good as what I remember the Oregon strawberry being. So then I think my other favorite berries go to other things. Not that anybody cares. So last time I talked about how picking the things, you know, which was all done by hand, and I know some of I remember looking at my father's college annual that he had for, I think, the final year that he was there. He graduated back in 1969, and on one of the pages, I remember as I was going through it as a kid, you know, trying to find pictures of my dad, of course. This was at Oregon State University. There was a group of kids down there working on a picker, an automated picker of strawberries. And I remember seeing it. It had these metal fingers on it, you know, that would kind of go through the strawberry bush. You know, strawberries grow fairly close to the ground on ridges, no less. So, and the hard part with strawberries isn't even so much that they're in the bush. You know, you can get something that'll comb through it, you know, which these kids had. But the trouble in my mind is that so many of the berries aren't even in the bush. They are on runners that drape down over the sides of the bushes and are laying on the ridge of dirt in which the bushes are planted. So the question in my mind, you know, I remember is hand picking them all the time. We were reaching down there, you know, to pick up these berries that were kind of just sitting on the dirt down there, you know, to pick them and put them in our crates. And so the question in my mind is, you know, if you were going to automate it, how would you pick them up out of the dirt without totally destroying the dirt ridge itself? And if you did that and it plowed through the ridge, you'd get all sorts of dirt and other corruption in with your berries. You didn't want to do that. You know, one thought I had at one point was suction, you know, to see if there would be air that could lift the berries enough. But you'd probably end up getting a whole bunch of dirt along with it anyhow. So it just isn't easy, and it's maybe one of those conundrums, you know, where, oh shoot, oh, for goodness sake. That's what happens when you cut it too close. So it might just be one of those crops that no matter what you try, it's always going to have to be picked by hand. So, and some things are just like that. You can't automate everything in life. It's hard though as we try. But all that being said, oh, I need to record. I got another load marked down on my sheet for Russell. Some of the farmers here locally, I know, the last picking of the year, or after rather, all of the pickers have left. You know, a lot of times the farmers would end up mowing the crop off, you know, kind of to overwinter it, and so there basically be nothing on there, it'd be kind of bare. So sometimes for the final picking, the farmers would send a bean picker through it. Now, a bean picker clips the foliage off in front of it, you know, when it's picking beans, and it just takes the whole bush and everything in, and then it has a big old fan in there to blow all of the stems, all the leaves, and all of that kind of thing out, and would just leave the green bean. Well, apparently you could use the same machine and probably had to adjust the settings, probably how hard the air was blowing or whatever, to make it work for strawberries. And the strawberries, I mean, they would get pretty banged up, going in there. So I don't know how many guys did it. I just remember seeing it being done out in the fields a time or two and hearing of it being done. I don't think my uncle ever did it. He didn't have a bean picker anyhow. So, matter of fact, I don't even know if any farmer has their own bean picker anymore. A lot of times that's custom done by the canneries, I think, on it for veggies. So, all that to say is you couldn't get away from good old hand picking of the berries, basically no matter what. Like I mentioned in the last video, now farmers will simply hire crews of people to come in. These people are, this is their job. It isn't just a random kid, because there was all sorts of headaches I know my uncle ran into trying to run a business and depending on, kids to come out and pick his crop, and the kids generally didn't even want to be there. Now, some of them did, but most of them didn't. And they were just, a lot of them just interested in goofing off, throwing berries at other people. I mean, I never did that kind of thing. Oh no. It just seems like there was a lot of messing around out the strawberry field. And I know that caused some headaches for my uncle. And a lot of these kids too, many of them, just maybe a lack of understanding, not understanding, that they were on someone else's property, that this was his crop, that it was his livelihood, would just disrespect the place and trash it. And, I remember there'd be baby plantings, of strawberries and these little plants, and there'd be kids out there riding their dirt bikes on them, just tearing stuff out and causing trouble for my uncles. That's something age old and just isn't going away anytime soon. People come from town or wherever they come from and they just think it's fair game to go tear it through a farmer's field. And they don't understand that there's a crop out there and it's that person's livelihood. So he had a bunch of that too. During my strawberry picking days too, I mentioned in the previous video, my brother and I did a lot of biking, and my parents supplied me with a cord and a lock that I was supposed to use, just a hand combination lock, to lock the bike to something solid, when we go out to the field, because he had, I mentioned in the previous video, he was a patch farmer. He didn't have the big tracts of land. He's got bigger tracts now, but in those days he didn't, when he was first starting out. So he had small parcels of ground, and many of them were close to town. Some of them were still close to town. And, when you get around more people, sad to say it, there is a tendency to be more crime. And, this, I had a bike that I had purchased with my own money. I don't even remember how much it was. I seem to recall it was over $1,000 though. So a spendy bike, it had like 18 speeds or something on it, which in those days, I mean, that was a big deal. Everybody knew of the old standard 10 speed, but I had an 18 speed. Well, this is what I used going to and from home and the strawberry fields. And well, I just, until it happens to you, you don't know what you don't know. And so, like I say, it's totally my fault. My parents supplied a cord and a lock to do it, but so much of the time I was just lazy. We'd get there, and I would just drop my bike. I'd try to hide it over. Oh, see, out in the field, a lot of times they had a refrigerated reefer van sitting there, and especially when we were doing fresh market, we would pick it and they would put it inside the refrigerated van after weighing it so that, so to keep cool and help preserve it. And so I would oftentimes stash my bike under the reefer van and just, hope nobody saw it. And most of the time they didn't, until one day that they did. And I just remember, being done with picking strawberries and going over to the place where my bike was, or was supposed to be, and it was just gone. And, I realize there's much more serious things that can happen to a person in life, but you just have this, you're left with this feeling of being violated. When someone just takes something, that was yours, and you work so hard for it. I mean, this is over $1,000. Do you know how many pounds of strawberries I had to pick, and how many hours I had to work in those days, to afford a bike like that? And anyone else in here who's ever had to pay for their own stuff, when they were a kid, or something that you wanted, you can well understand, what that feels like when it's your own and you work for it, and then some callous person takes it. And unfortunately, we never did figure out who took it. And my mom, used it as a teachable opportunity, first to, she didn't say "I told you so," but she asked, of course, well, did you lock it up? Did you put it, using the cord of the lock that we gave you, did you take care of it? And well, no, I had to admit that I'd been an idiot, and not done that. But then the next thing she did, as a teachable moment, if you will, was to literally file a police report. And it just so happened where my uncle had this particular strawberry patch, it was right across the road from a combination fire station and police station. And so I still remember us going over there and walking in there to the door, this heavy door. We couldn't go inside. It was one of those you had to ring, and someone would come on an intercom. And eventually, some cop came out, and I remember we filed some paperwork, and he asked me all sorts of questions about the bike. And what I know now that I didn't know then is that I wasn't going to have a, prayer of getting my bike back, even though he asked for the description of it and everything. And I mean, just think about it. I mean, talk about looking for a needle in a haystack. The color of the bike was black. Well, how many black bikes are out there on the road? There's scads of them everywhere. And as if some cop, with everything they got to do, is going to take time to, pull everybody over that's on a black bike and ask them some questions as to where they got it. I mean, they're not going to do that. So it was kind of a fruitless exercise to just go file the paperwork, but it's the one and only time in my life, where I've ever filed a police report, at least that I can recall. Well, maybe, maybe I take that back. I guess when I got in a car accident, maybe there was a police report there too. I don't remember exactly on that. So, yeah, painful lesson. And yeah, what do you do? I mean, someone takes something and it wasn't theirs, and your parents have taught you that that is wrong. And so you wonder about some other kid out there. You wonder, did their parents tell them that it was wrong to take things that don't belong to you? Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. I don't know. Maybe you just chalk it up to that particular kid, I assume it was a kid, just happened to need the bike more than I did. Who knows? All I know is I didn't have my bike anymore. That kind of sucked. And I don't recall what we did afterwards. I think I maybe borrowed a bike from someone else in the family, maybe to complete the summer or whatever. So the rest of the summer, I talked a little last time about irrigation and some of the size of the pipes, that my uncle had, probably because he got some deal on it, The standard way it seems like we set up irrigation pipe is there was a pump source wherever that was, and don't get me started on water rights. That's a whole nother issue. I don't know how it is in other countries, but I know here in the U.S., depending on what state you live in, I know there's different water doctrines. There's different areas where water comes from. The whole southwest part of the U.S. is really a desert. And there's lots of people that live down there. They like the climate, and so there's lots of water needs that's hauled in. And so it's really a pretty big political brouhaha down there over water. But here locally, you can't just drill a well. I think you got to apply for a special permit and those kinds of things. And it's my understanding that water rights are held separate from land rights, probably separate from mineral rights, and it's only a right of use. As I understand it here in my state, water, 100% of it belongs to the state, belongs to all the people. So even though, like in my home here, we have a well from which we get our water, it technically all belongs to the state, and I just happen to have a permit or a right to use it, here on our property. And I don't know about quantity. I think it's pretty much the well. If you're pulling water from a running stream or a river, those water rights are handled differently, I think, than they are for wells. Like I say, I'm getting to the extent of my knowledge on it. All I know is it's an issue, water rights and whatnot. So by hook or by crook, somehow my uncle got rights in various places, to use water. And sometimes he had to get pretty creative, in terms of whatever deal he could negotiate and set up, to get water. For example, several of his fields were in an industrial zone in town. We're talking, this is not farming country at all. Well, maybe it was. It was a mushroom farm. It was right on the edge of town, and they grew mushrooms, and they used a lot of water to clean their dark houses out, where they grew the things. And so there was a lot of wastewater that ordinarily had to be put into the sewer system in the city of Salem. And that costed the mushroom farm a lot of money. And so, as I understand it, my uncle, maybe I should say this too. The mushroom farm, it had a lot of buildings, where they grew the mushrooms in, and they were all 100% dark in there. That's, I guess, where mushrooms thrive so they can grow. And then they had some yard space. They would bring in all these huge straw bales that they would rot down and put all sorts of nasty chemical fertilizer, whatever stuff on them. They basically smelled like manure. And this is what the mushrooms, of course, would grow in. Oh, there's another bale down here. So they had space to do that. And then out back, I don't know how big the parcel was. Maybe 100 acres total that this mushroom farm was on. Shoot, maybe it was 200. I really don't know. But clear in the back and on the sides, there was open areas. And I think my uncle noticed this, and so he went to him and asked if he could farm it. And the deal, as I understand it, that he pulled off is he said, look, I have to irrigate my crops, based on what I grow. And so he asked if he could use their water from their, the water was fine. That came out of the mushroom houses. It just smelled to the high heavens, And actually, it probably had a lot of compost content in it. It probably was really good water, when it comes right down to it. It's just nasty to be in. So I don't know if they had a settling pond before or if he himself put it in on their property, but they installed something there. All the wastewater was pumped into it, and then my uncle irrigated it. And what this kept them from having to do was to send it out the sewer system, which cost a lot of money. And I could be mistaken, and he'll probably never hear this, so would never know to correct the nature of the arrangement, but I think he got free use of their property by saving them enough money so they didn't have to pay for the sewer crop. You talk about a great deal. That was an excellent one. It was a little painful to work, in town there. I mean, it did butt up against, some residential areas. The water he was irrigating with was nasty, so it was throwing it through the air. So you had some of that going on. But he cut their bill by so much that they were willing to let him rent the land in the air for free so he could farm on it. I think I have that right. So what did he grow on it? Well, he grew strawberries, of course. At some point he was getting into nursery stock, so some of that was in there. In later years, as he got into farming sod, he had some sod back in there. When he couldn't use the ground, he sublet it to some others. I remember hearing green beans were grown back there. And yeah, they used this runoff water from the mushroom houses. So my brother and I are out there irrigating in this stuff. And over here, I seem to recall they used larger irrigation pipes and what have you. These were 3-inch lines. And oh yeah, I got started saying kind of how you would set it up. You'd have a pump at some location, and here at this mushroom plant, there was a pond that had a pump in it. And out of the pump, it would go into what's called main line. And I seem to recall my uncle's main line was about 8 inches in diameter, long pipes, big pipes, and then you would take these out to the field in these big pipes, and then off of some of the pipes, it was called a bell. I think it was a bell end, or however they were called for the pipe, where you could put this device over it, and it had a spigot on it, where you could spin it open, and then this device that it was sitting on would funnel the water into a smaller pipe, 3-inch in diameter, 4-inch, or whatever it was. And sometimes there might be more than one line coming off the main line going out. And this was standard through all his fields, always pump, main line, and then the laterals out in the field. Gradually the pipes getting smaller as you headed out there. I think to maintain pressure, it's just basic physics. The further you are from the pump, the lower the pressure. And so in order to keep pressure high, you would have to keep decreasing the diameter of the pipes, to get it out there and keep it high. Another one. I'm trying to remember, did I record the last? I'm not sure I did. I may have to watch this again. I'll put that in there. Alright. Another load. We are up to 30 G's. But this water, this mushroom water, was so nasty. It didn't have chemicals. It just, it smelled like manure. Even though it wasn't manure, it smelled like it. And once you got it on your skin, you just stunk the rest of the day, because we were very active. We did a lot of manual labor on this farm, so we were sweating all the time, and then when this stuff got in your pores, and then you sweat some more, it just stunk foul. And there's all sorts of things you gotta do, when you're running irrigation. Changing pipe is one thing. Basically the procedure we always use going out there, if we were just moving a line across the field, it was pretty simple. You'd move the bell on the main line to the next set, you count the rows over, And then pipe by pipe, you would pick them all up. First you would grab the end, and there was a way you could work the end of it so it would undo the latch on the far end. And so you would pull it out, and the first order of business was to tip it up and empty all the water out, because otherwise it'd be too heavy. And then once it was empty, you could go to the middle of the pipe and then walk it over, and then following a similar procedure, you could latch it, with another pipe. In those days, that's kind of how we did it. Nowadays, I know there's all sorts of fancy irrigation systems they have out in the fields, wheel lines and so forth that they have out there that they can automate it somewhat. But I know the system my uncle had was just good old-fashioned lateral pipes and elbow grease, namely by his nephews, to move them in the field. So once we did all that, we'd get it all in there, and of course the last lateral in the line has a plug in it, so the water can't go out. Well, then we would go turn on the pump, and we would go back out to the field. It always took a certain amount of time before the water would come out, and you could hear the lines hiss as the air was rushed out, and it just started filling it, and pretty soon the sprinklers would go, and then all of a sudden it's like all the line would pressurize at once, and boom, everything would be going. And when you're dealing with fresh, pure water, it's a beautiful thing to see, and there really isn't much that can go wrong. But I'll tell you what, in this filthy, dirty water at the mushroom plant, there was often all sorts of other corruptions that were in the water, that we had to account for in the pipes, that would plug nozzles. These little, as I think on it now, this is going to be really, really gross. But I almost wonder if some of them were cigarette filters, the little tiny filter that goes in the end of a cigarette, maybe it would get out. Maybe it's the workers, I don't know, but there sure was a powerful lot of them. But they would get jammed in a nozzle, and so, my brother and I would have these wires, flag wires basically. We'd go out, and while the system was pressured up, we would attempt to unclog the nozzle using these wires, poking it in and poking around some obstruction, trying to clear the line up. And when we couldn't clear it up, well, then a lot of times we had other things we needed to do, which got us even more dirty. But anyway, now that the bell is rung, I'll leave off boring anybody any further on it, at least until the next episode. Thank you so much for coming along and listening to me talk and reminisce and enjoying good old Gelvin Valley as we try to pick up all of our bales. And, oh, here comes another one. Pick up all of our bales and clean up after harvest. You all have a wonderful day, and I will see you back here on the next one. Goodbye.